There goes hours 3 and 4. The Procore onboarding, and we are going to be focused on project financials today. All right, guys, just feel free to ask as many questions as you have as we go along the way, because that's what this is all about. Okay, so inside of project financial management in Procore, we have these different sections. We have prime contracts, budget, commitments, change orders, change events, direct costs, and invoicing. The prime contracts, let's start there because that's really the beginning of the project for us. And you can't actually start issuing any prime contract change orders without a prime contract. So the way that this actually works is Fiona opens up the project inside of Procore when it's bidding. And when it gets converted to, well, even before it gets converted to pre-construction, whether we get the LOI or not, the job gets opened up inside of Procore. That is basically Fiona letting Billy in accounting know, hey, we've got this job, open it in the accounting software as well, so that people can start charging their time to it. From there, it just kind of sits there and hangs out while we're waiting for a contract to be generated and executed. That actually is a process that's handled by Shannon. She's the one that, when we get these contracts from the GC, whoever they're sent to, if they're sent to sales or pre-con manager, whoever, they go to her and then she routes them around the office to whoever needs to review them and comment on any of the scope items, on any of the costs associated with it. So usually, you know, Kevin's looking at that, the PXs are probably looking at that. And then ultimately we end up with an executed prime contract. The prime contract then gets put into Spectrum and pushes over to Procore. And so Billy will go in, he'll open that job up. He won't really build out a schedule of values inside of the accounting software. He'll just put one line in it. So just say that it was a $2 million project. He's going to put $2 million in there. And then he's going to push it over in that ERP area where I showed you guys yesterday. Yep. And then he pulls it in. It's the system's constantly refreshing. He'll go into his ERP section of Procore. He'll see it there. He will add it into Procore. And then all of a sudden we end up with this prime contract populating here. It gives you an option to create a prime contract in here, but we never want to do this because we can't send it the other direction. Spectrum will not let us send a prime contract from Procore. So that's why we do it that way. Not my favorite because I can't automate the process. Like I mentioned to you, there was like this person had to email this person and that, you know, unfortunately there's only so many people that are touching it, so that it's still controllable, but I can't just have a workflow set up so it just goes to each person along the line. So in here, this is just kind of your summary page. If you have 2 prime contracts on a job, which happens, and that would happen when you have just a design assist contract, maybe for like $100,000 on the job. And then to do the actual fabrication and installs another $1 million, you would have a separate contract for that, because sometimes we're involved so early on in the process that we may be getting that design assist contract directly from the end user or the architect sometimes, whereas our fab and install contract is typically coming from the GC. So we might have 2. So you would just see both of those listed here in that case. So you can see on this job, I'm actually going to go into a real project for this and show you guys what these look like. Let's go forward. My boy Kyle's got some good financials going on this one. So let's go into contract. So here's a beautiful example of that. You can see we had a $45,000 DA contract at some point, and then a $16 million fab and install contract. So you can, when you're looking here, you can see this little sync button. That's optimal. We know that the accounting system in Procore have communicated with that prime contract. See our status is approved. I don't like the fact that somebody didn't go in and actually click that this was an executed contract. And I'll show you where that comes into play later. It really doesn't hold anything else up. It's just attention to detail thing. Then we also, but it's possible that they push the contract in here without it actually being fully executed. At this point, I would hope it is though. It also will give you a little summary on this page of any approved change orders or pending that you have outstanding. So just more or less a summary sheet. What we want to do is we actually want to dive into that prime contract. That's going to give us a little bit more information. So here, the very first tab, just basic information on the contract. Here's the schedule of values. So this one sucks. It's about 200 line items long for the schedule of values. So this has to be input by somebody on the project team once this prime contract gets opened up. We will not be able to, and likely it's going to be done by the pre-con manager before it gets to you guys. The reason I say that is because they're not going to be able to bill the job without that SOV being put in here. And there's usually a few monthly payment applications that have gone out before the project gets handed over. So thankfully, it should be built out for you. That being said, you guys want to have input into how that SOV is being put together, and that's where just communication, amongst the team. And I think everybody's been doing a pretty good job lately of trying to get ops PMs involved earlier, and in the pre-con phase of the project. So that would be your time to communicate with that pre-con manager and be like, hey, what's the schedule of values looking like? Can I review it and give you my 2 cents on it? So that lives in here. We're not really using any inclusions and exclusions here. That would be if we were to generate a prime contract in the system ourselves. And we're really not doing that. We're more or less creating a placeholder for it because the GC is the one that's issuing us the contract. We just want to put in all of that same data, if you will, in here. Then change orders. This is a tab, which is just a summary of where we're at, what's been submitted, and what's been approved and what's been synced. So right here is a good example of one where I know there's nothing to look at because I can see that it's approved and synced. This one right here, it's approved, but it hasn't been sent to ERP. He's got some issues going on here. This one says not ready, and I scroll over here. That means that he did not apply some costs in that change order correctly. So I'm probably gonna have to get with them and get that fixed.
So is the sending to ERP like basically the final step, pretty much?
It is. It's after it's gone through the workflow and it's been approved, and then you hit send it through.
Yeah.
So this is.
I just was finishing one for Princeton, so I just got done. I sent to ERP, then changed the status to closed, or I believe it's the PCO written. So
that's the change event status that it's showing you down there. That's the commitment change order up top. So it's just showing you that it's tied to that change event. That was its origin, if
Yeah.
you will. Doesn't mean anything. It's just, if you wanted to quickly
Just for
jump
completeness.
into that change event, it gives you the option to just hyperlink basically into it from down below.
And then I said send to ERP. What does the retrieve mean?
Retrieve means if you had sent it to ERP and something's not right, either most of the time you're not retrieving from the ERP, it's accounting rejecting it,
Okay.
honestly. And that's when they're seeing something that is gonna cause an error. Either you exceeded those 30 characters that we talked about, or has special characters are like iffy. Like sometimes they'll go through like those,
Mhm.
like that number sign and
Yeah.
the dash there, it's gonna be fine. That's not what our error is on,
Okay.
on that one. And then they'll accept it in, but sometimes they do reject it. Retrieving, once it's been approved, you guys can't really edit it.
Right.
All right, it's really kind of locked it in. And then I gotta go in, or somebody else has to go in and call up Procore on live chat
Right.
and get them on and say, I need you guys to unlock this one, because I can't even as an administrator unlock this approved one.
Okay.
But what's interesting is that I know this one's got some issues and I'm gonna have to do that.
Nice.
And I'll show you how this became an issue for him when we go in and do a change order here in a minute. But this is just a nice quick page where I can look and see, okay, where are we at with this? Like this one looks like it's ready to send. I don't know why it hasn't been sent to ERP yet. So this one, bless you. And then he's got a couple out there in draft. Another place, well, let me just keep kind of going through here, these tabs. Another tab inside of the prime contract will be our invoices and our payment applications. And so that SOV that I showed you on the general page back there, that basically feeds through to the invoices. And then we're able to go in and just kind of start creating our, what looks exactly like an AIA G702 and G703 inside of the system. So I'll show you the invoices here in a little bit. We're not tracking payments received under the prime contracting here. We've got a cool tool that is gonna do this for you in another location. And then again, it's just like the change history stuff. Now this financial markup tab is kind of fun. You can add in any type of horizontal markups or vertical markups that are going to apply to your change events and your change orders. And you can do that at the contract level and it will apply to every new one that you set up. You can always edit them later on. But getting in your couple of basic markups here just saves you from having to add it individually each time moving forward. So just good to know, right? So you got our standard, well, we got our 10% overhead and profit bond. That's a low rate. We'd sold that one, unfortunately, before our bonding rate change. This is 2% now. We're allowed a 5% markup on our tiered subs and 6% on materials there. So you can see that I've got that right now, just applying to certain types of cost codes. So in here, I have the ability to go in and add that to labor if I wanted to. So it'll map there. Where that becomes important is once we start getting into change events. I'm gonna go to an access project. I'm gonna build one out. Yes. There's two different ways to start. Well, there's more than two different ways. Because you can create actually a change event from a TNN ticket. You can click on the change event button itself, or you can just hit this little plus sign as a little quick and easy way to do it. So just know that every single change order, whether it's upstream to the GC or downstream to a fabricator or an installer, we have to start it from a change event. Okay, this is our nucleus to any type of change. So when you go in, notice it's already populated a number for me. We must have 114, or it's seeing at least 114 is the last change event that was in there on the sandbox test project. This is going to automatically just find the next number in line. So you should never have to go in and change this number. I see people going in sometimes and trying to change event numbers, and there's really just no need to let it automatically happen, because what we're trying to actually do is create like a timeline of the job anyways, and I want to see that sequentially personally. So this one, we'll just call it a test, change to stair A. All right, these statuses are going to start getting a little important, or more important for us, even more so moving forward, because we built out a dashboard where we're viewing these. These numbers are automatically being populated and filtered into them. So the different statuses options that we have are closed, PCCO, CCO, written. So that's the one that you were just looking at. And that basically, for me, when I'm looking at my log of change events, lets me know I've sent it upstream and I've written all my downstream commitment change orders, and I don't have to look at this thing anymore. So when I'm viewing them holistically on the project, I'll filter them so I don't even look at closed anymore. I know I'm done with it, right? Out of sight, out of mind at that point. Closed void, there are going to be some times where you start one and then it doesn't need to go anywhere. You just simply put in a placeholder.
Just bookmark in there.
As a bookmark, yep. There's draft, which is when you don't know what you're going to do with anything. You just say, oh, there's a potential delay here, and I'm going to start trying to track things. That's the status you want to use. Then we have these statuses for, we know we're going to send them upstream to the client, and we know it's going to be disputed. So we're only actually going to count 10% of that entitlement, if you will, from them on the PCCO, because we know they're going to redline it and hack it up. And if we get 10%, then we're probably lucky when we're in a dispute. Pending, we've already started working on it. We have a good feeling like we're being good partners to the GC at that point. We don't have anything executed in writing, even though our contract tells us we're supposed to. And then the next one is actually in progress, meaning we've started committing costs against that change event, and we don't have anything executed or written to the GC.
So was it, I guess, an error if, so I just sent out this, I guess, change event / change order to Fem Steel, they're gonna start doing designs based on that proposal and everything. If they have not built to that, obviously, if they have not done that, should I not have closed it then? Because I'm still gonna see costs.
No, once you've committed it,
Okay.
You're good to go.
Okay.
Unless, so here's the other thing that comes into play. Along with status is this scope type, right? So this is is this an in scope or an out of scope? So anything in scope means we
Accounted for it.
already own it, whether we accounted for it or not.
Oh,
right? And out of scope is going to be anything that we know we're going to send that PCC request upstream to the GC. So those two things are important to try to pick the right status and scope. And it'll make more sense when I show you this dashboard here in a little bit. As far as the origin goes, that's just an option to tag it to an RFI, tag it to a meeting minute item, or an observation. The type, really, this is going to be an owner change. Is it going to come out of contingency, we think? Is this a back charge that we're going to send to one of our subcontractors, or is it a risk that we have not yet determined? These are just giving us really good filter options to try to figure out overall where our exposure is on a project. So I'm gonna not actually put an origin in here because I don't have one, and we're just gonna say for this example, this is gonna be an owner client change due to design development, and this is gonna be out of scope. And then I will have it going attached to my contract. If I had 2 contracts on here in the drop down, I'd be able to pick and choose which one. In the description, I'm just gonna put change to stair A due to ductwork location.
This one, this is basically saying this is an extra that the GC wanted to do this extra step that we couldn't foresee or anything, and we're gonna charge them for it.
Yep, that's the example I'm gonna run with right now. What we just said, GC requested that we move forward with drafting modifications while we price up the PCCO. Okay, and I can attach anything here. I can do it from my computer, attach photos or anything. Can always drag and drop. Now I've got my, whatever my attachment is. So any of your working files that I was, using, just be able to attach here. Then I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna start building out my rough order of magnitude for it. And that's when our cost codes, our budget codes just become very critical, because all of these are ultimately gonna tie into the line items that are in our budget. So what I like to do when I'm building anything out, I like to make sure in a separate window. It's a lot easier when I have multiple screens in front of me, which I don't right now. To go into this, yeah, well then I'd have to separate it. I'm gonna go into my budget and I'm gonna make sure that whatever cost code I'm selecting here in my ROM matches and maps to a line item that's in my budget. So I can see here, I have certain drafting, right? It's not the best title for one, but these are new. So I know that this cost code exists. So these cost codes, we actually have a matrix of which cost codes that we use for each item on a project. These budget amounts and cost codes are already going to be set by the time you guys start working on these projects, as estimating and pre-con goes through their phase of the project. They're constantly updating their original budget amount inside the system here. They're the ones that are assigning all of the cost codes for each line item. And then when they hand it over to ops, we actually lock that first column and we lock the budget. And then those are the codes that have been established for that project moving forward. All these is just a way for us to send it to this line item and always know that that's what we were looking at. So I'm just going to say this drafting. And so this is unfortunately, we're looking at the sandbox test project. So note these codes may not all be the appropriate cost codes that are part of our cost code matrix now. So like I can see where this one is an S code, and for drafting, we only use O codes. While I'm thinking about it, I'm going to send you guys a copy that cough code matrix, so you have a copy. I'm actually getting ready to add a new one for pre-con in, and so you know what? I'll send you guys the new one, and because I'm going to do that like literally over the next day or so, because we're going to have a cost code for pre-con to start tracking their time separately. From right now, it's all getting thrown in the 605, 100, 05 L code, which is project management labor. So it's blended. So a lot of times what you end up seeing when you get the job from them is you'll see that original budget amount of 145,000, and then you'll see a job cost to date. And this, since it's the sample project, you don't see that, but maybe $50,000 of that PM budget is already gone by the time it gets to you guys. So we just want to separate that. So we're seeing how much they actually spent versus how much you guys are actually spending on the job. So that's a small tweak. So I'll send that here to everybody, including you guys here in the next day or so. So because this is just an example, let's see, what is something we're gonna have to do. All right, so let's say that we have this test subcontractor fab and it installs the stair. So go in here. I know that. Have that. The other thing that's kind of neat too, if I don't do this here and I know who the vendor is on a project, it will show me, and again, this is not a great example because we've used this test subcontractor so many times. You can see all these different contracts that we've assigned to them on this one job. But the idea is that if you pick your vendor, it's going to give you that option to just drop down, add the contract that it's attached to in there, and it'll actually populate the budget code. Because we've used this test subcontractor so many times on this project, it's not going to automatically do that. But I usually start by grabbing the vendor and letting that populate and the budget code populate. The other thing is though that I did just look at my budget, so I know that that was that 405 code I wanted to use. And you can see anybody that's got that code is going to populate right there too. So that part's pretty cool. And we're just going to say now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, I can elect to do it on this page, or I can go to my next sheet, whether or not I want to add in any type of cost, rough order of magnitude here or not. This little calculator button, I can hit and then get this exclamation sign as a triangle, which I can now just do a manual entry instead of, let's just say this is a $10,000 cost change. And if I were to just do a lump sum, annual did not. Let's just do one line item for, let me do two line items. Let's just say we also have some PM time associated with this. So this area of the description is where those 30 characters come into play, which doesn't give you a lot of room. But I know that if it doesn't extend out really past this screen here, then I'm probably okay. But if I went in and I added a bunch more, and I can't see them, I know that I've exceeded 30 characters. So that's my little cheat associated with it. Here's the other thing that can be a little wonky. You can't see those X's right now, but they're still there. I gotta go back over and make sure they're gone. That is probably one of the most important things to remember.
And that AM will affect it in the description.
It won't. They try to get you not to use them as much as possible. I've had many people from both Procore and Spectrum tell me special characters can be an issue. But I really haven't actually ever had to fix that error before. So I'm kind of calling their bluff on it a little bit. So you just want to try to use abbreviations as much as possible, you know, stay under those characters. And let's just say I'm going to do 10 hours of PM time at $120 an hour. Okay, cool. So that's just a rough order of magnitude at this point. It's just a placeholder. And I didn't even have to fill anything out there if I didn't want to in order to create this change event and get it started. Now I'm going to go into, so I'm in the change event itself now. If I want to hop out, go back, see all the change events on this project. Take a whole bunch, probably. Take a little time. So here's where you are able to literally scroll up and down through everything the way that it was put in. The other option is you can always change your views on here, which are going to automatically change which columns are populating for you. So you notice how that just looks a little bit different. Another thing is, because this is kind of rounding up a summary. So I didn't have to look at all those line items. I'm only looking at the big ones. So it was easy for me to get down to 115 really quickly. I can also go in and configure and turn all these columns on and off that I want to only see what I want. So if I don't care about the origin, and I don't care about the change reason, and I don't care about the type, the scope, I can just hide those. And now it got even more simple for me right there to view. So I highly recommend that when you're on a job and it's got a ton of change orders. It's just really easy. And now, like, the statuses are going to really be what's important for you to look at, because that means that, you know, if it's open, you still have something left to do with it. Now you'll see this column here, this prime change order column and prime change order title. Well, those I know if one was written, that I'm done with it. Right? On the revenue side. On the cost side, I can also see that I have my commitment change written there. So this one is no longer open. I've gone upstream, I've gone downstream. This one could be closed. The one that we were just starting to work on, though, notice I have no commitments associated with it. I don't even have a proposed revenue cost in yet. Another way to filter is over on this side, where you can just search by open. So any of my closed ones would be gone. This is where those scopes also come into play if you were trying to do a search filter for them. So that part's pretty cool, but let's just focus on this 115 that I have right now. I'm actually going to go back to a more busy screen when I'm doing this, because I do want to be able to do some modifications directly from this view. So I'm not inside of this change event at all right now. I'm just on the summary page, but what I can do is I can go in and make some edits right from this page. So it's kind of nice. You don't get, you don't have to go back and forth, to get inside of it to make those edits. So here, let's just say I want to do a manual entry of what I'm going to charge the client for this one. And actually, no, I'm not going to charge him 150, but I'll charge him 20,000. I think it was a $10,000 line item. All right. And then I think I'm going to probably charge them $120 an hour. And maybe my real cost is only 100, even though I put it in at the ROM. I can come back in and edit that and say my real cost is really only $100 an hour. And that's going to change for me right here. What's cool about this is I can scroll over here to the right and I can see my over unders. So something went off here. Like it looks like I'm going to make $10,000 on that line item, but I'm going to lose 200 on that line item. What did I do? Oh, I changed the revenue. Set my cost. It should go the other way. All right, cool. So it looks like I'm going to pick up about $10,200 on these two line items. Now, those prime contract markups that I showed you guys on the Ford project inside of the prime contract, in this project, we've only got these two set up. But then you can see they've already auto-populated down here for me on the bottom of that change event.
And that's because it's a vertical, that's how it's reaching down.
That's because it's a vertical markup that I had put in at the prime contract level. Absolutely. And so that's just seeing it and it's automatically kind of calculating that in there for me. Now, here's the important thing to know. This information doesn't go anywhere other than living right here in change events. Okay, as far as if I'm looking at my budget, I don't see change events. If I'm looking at my prime contract, I don't see change events. If I'm looking in commitments, I don't see change events. I have to take it from here and send it where I want it to go. So the way that I do that is I click on the button over here. And now I say I want to add this to a prime contract change order, a new one associated with that contract. And it's going to take everything that I've already done and pre-populate that prime contract change order request for me that I'm going to send out. So when I go through here, so this is already, again, auto numbered this for me. Now for prime contract change orders, I like to do the job number. This is something else you guys want to know. Job number, and then I do like 00. Because that is giving it its own unique number that's never going to be used again.
That's good for the accounting.
And it's good for accounting, right? So I know that that job, I'm only going to ever have 1001 associated with it, 1002 associated with it, or in this case 009. So that's good. I like to change the title because nobody really cares what our change event numbers are, right? Because it's just an in-house placeholder for us. So I usually delete that out there. And then down here, it's going to also come in and it's going to take any of that description that I had previously put in my change event, automatically populate it for me. I'll do that there. You can add additional language here, take out anything that you maybe had in the change event that you don't want somebody to see. A good example of that is if I would have had a bunch of other attachments that only pertained to my commitment on that change event, I'd want to go in here and take those off so that they weren't going to the GC. All right. So let's just say whatever attachment I had in there, I don't want, but it's nice to have them and hit the X button than having to go find them again later on and dragging them and dropping them back in. Okay, so the PCC workflow approvals should already be set up on your job. Did we look at workflows at all yesterday? I think we talked about them. I'm going to show you guys where those are actually set up here on the projects themselves. If they're set up, all of the information is going to automatically populate here, so you shouldn't have to do anything with this. And then you go, okay, all that looks awesome. Just so you know, this a lot of times you're not going to have an invoice date associated with it. You're not going to have a paid date. You may or may not have a requested from. That's okay. I do recommend always putting in the schedule impact. If you know what your substantial completion is currently, go to your schedule, see what it is. If you think it's going to affect you, go and try to put this information there, because at least we're notifying them of that we think it's going to extend out. When we actually get the real change order back from them, they're probably going to have 0 days on it, right? And we have to argue with them over that. But at least we've documented, we told you guys it was going to take us an extra 30 days due to that change. So I always like to populate that. And then at that point, we can click create on this. So my partner Ralph just got a notification that his ball is in his court to approve this for his review of this change request. And so he'll basically be able to come in and review it. And he can either approve, send it to the VPPX, or probably an old workflow set up on here, or he should have the option to reject it. On your workflows, they're definitely going to be both. He can add any comments that he wants. So I'll just put, these are only internal. Make sure this gets sent to Bob and copy Ted with the ownership review, something like that. I'm acting on his behalf right now. All right, so now I'm going to be the construction exec here internally, and I'm going to say reject this and say, why aren't you guys thinking about costs for XYZ? I want to see the backup for this, or that before I agree to this. And so this is all, remember, this is the prime contract workflow. So this is all before it even goes out to the GC. And we're just making sure internally we're all aligned on what we're shooting for. A lot of our change orders are 6 figures plus. We have very few small change orders. They're all seem to be very large. So it just makes sense that as a team we're reviewing them. So here I'm just going to say that I'm going to approve this one internally. And now what's going to happen is it's going to go, what workflows in here? It's back to Ralph. So at this point, it comes back to the project manager. And now everybody internally that needed to review it made their comments. We've got it all ready to go. That's when you go in here and you export this PDF and you send it out to the client for them to review. And that's our proposed change order essentially, right? We've got a cover sheet that's already built in that basically takes everything that you've done in the background, puts it here. This is what it actually looks like. So you can see my line items here. You can see all of my markups that were applied. And you can then, it's pulling from the original contracts on any change orders that have been previously authorized to date. So it actually looks a little bit different. We had taken some of this information off of the latest and greatest at one point in time when I set it up for the test job. This is. But then at that point, you take this, you send it over to your client, say, here's the change order request, and then we wait, right? Wait for them forever to get back to us. And we have 10 meetings in a row with them. We're like, guys, where's my change order? Where's my change order? When we finally get it back from them, we can either say, all right, it was approved by them, or they rejected it and they redlined it. So if we reject it, it puts it back in. Need to make edits to markups, something like that, right? If they reject it, I'm gonna reject it. Now that puts it back in Ralph's court again. He's gonna love me for this, by the way. So that he's gonna go back in, he's gonna go into his financial markup, he's gonna change that. He's gonna edit the markup so that we have no horizontal here. Just gonna delete that because they called us out on that. I'm gonna delete that markup off of that.
Can you explain what the horizontal markup?
Horizontal is like an inline markup. So usually you don't ever want to expose a horizontal markup. You could mark up your labor rates in a horizontal markup, and you could map any of that overage directly to your contribution margin or directly to your contingency so that it's just happening in the background for you. We don't really use the horizontal much. We use that change event page where you're kind of looking at here's my revenue and here's my cost and what's my over under. We're pretty much stop there. Let's say, okay, so let's pretend the GC marked that up. He said no. And then he caught us on material handling. He's like, nah, that's included in your overhead and profit. All right, so I just deleted those two. And now I can go back. And they're going to be gone and off of my change request now. And I can always just export it in PDF and look at it and go, did I make those changes that they had redlined? Sure. No longer there. What he called me out on is gone. Now I can go back in and I can send it through the workflow again.
That's approved.
And say, yeah, so in this case, it'd be like Tyler or Casey needed to revise due to markups. So they'll see that note when it goes back into their court, and I'll go, all right, cool, I'll approve it again. I can always go here to change orders again and look and see now this change order 9 that I created. Notice these aren't going to match because I'm telling you guys to do it this way, which will be helpful for you later on. I can see it's still sitting in draft because it's in PX's court right now. Once it's been approved by that client, you go in and you basically say, client approved this. That's when everything locks, and that's when we hit send to ERP. Okay.
Does the entry of all that, back and forth, or it's finally approved, gets stored anywhere?
It does. Yeah, it actually gets stored inside of so I'm.
Oh, it's back when change history or something like that.
It'll be there, but like this most recent one, you can see this is where the note was to me in the VPPX role that I just sent on behalf of Ralph. This is the latest note. You can always go into all of change history And it's gonna be a little bit different, on some of those notes in the prime contract change order workflow than it is in the commitment workflow, for example. Like, when we're writing a new commitment to go out, it's gonna look a little bit different because I haven't gone in and changed all of the workflows for the prime contract change order, and the commitment change orders yet. There's a whole new data that we have basically been using where I can go in and rewrite these workflows myself instead of having Procore do it for us. And then every time we want to make a change to a workflow, I gotta send it to them. It takes them like a month to get back to us. So now I can actually go into all of those myself. What those look like. For the prime contract right now, we have a workflow setting for it, but there's no template assigned here because we're not routing that around in Procore. Remember I told you that one, this one's coming from Spectrum, right? So I don't have a workflow there. So the only thing we have right now is that PCCO approval. So if I wanted to take Ralph out of there and put me and I don't know, Tyler, and Kevin. And then Ralph still the PM. So then, once you set this up the first time in your workflow settings, it's gonna auto-populate into all those change orders for the rest of the project. So unless you have a different team member working on the project that you need to go in and replace their role, you would go in and you would do that in that configuration area. But that's the only time that you need to do it. Setting it up once at the beginning. And it's probably already gonna be set up for you by the time you guys are touching the projects, but that's where you would go to confirm it's set up correctly, is this little gear icon. So let's say, so now I've got that process going on the commitment or on the prime contract side, right? I still have to go in and do something with my committed side. My best recommendation to you guys is going to be the same time you start the draft process upstream, started going downstream. I like to try to keep things in the same like general step if I can. So you'll notice now when we go back and we look at this change event here, I can see that I've moved these costs, revenue upstream to that. I still don't have anything for a commitment down here. There is also going to be a request for quote option as part of change events. If you want to send it out from inside of the system here to a tiered subcontractor. So I'm gonna go into this one. I don't know if I get that far in detail today. So just let's not go down that road because there's enough that we're already going to be talking about. Let's just stay on how to actually write the commitment change order. But look at the tutorial that we've got for how to actually send that RFP on a change order out through here. Just okay. Then I can see I don't have anything associated with that commitment. So I'm going to take I know this one's internal. This is a labor. I'm not supposed to have a commitment associated with it. all right? But this one, I am. So I'm just gonna take this one line item and I'm gonna add to commitment change order. A new one. And you can do it with matching cost goods, so it'll filter that for me. And then it's gonna go ahead and it's gonna do the same exact thing where it preps my commitment change order for me. Here, this is super, super important. I wanna do that same thing, job number, 1, 2, 3, 4. I wanna do which commitment number it is as my next 2 digits. So I would have to look and see which commitment this was.
Deposit its own one, didn't it?
Well, it wanted to populate as its own number. Whatever had been done last inside of this test project, right? But the designation I like to use for my commitment change orders is job number, commitment number. If it's commitment number 10 on the job, that's gonna be my next one, and then their change order number. So that gives me 99 commitment options on a job and 99 change orders to each commitment. And to stay with a unique number across company-wide. Nobody else will ever use that number. And right now, that's the best way that I can think of to avoid the limitations in the accounting software. Once we get to project 9,999, hopefully we'll have a new accounting software by then. That's kind of my goal. Or at least Mike's goal. So it should give us enough options. So this would be, let's just say it was commitment 10 and it was change order 1 for them. And that's how I would put that number in. Then the next thing, so this is actually commitment 9. Let's do 9. And change order 1 for those guys. So the same sort of thing happens where they don't care about our change order numbers, just like our client didn't. So I always take those out. Now here, this becomes important for us down here on these change event line items. So this is the problem that I think Kyle was having on that other one for Ford that we didn't, that we looked at. I said, I'm gonna have to work with him to fix that. It is now asking us to associate this line item somewhere on our budget schedule of values. So my suggestion every single time on this, so think about looking at a G702 and a G703 when you're doing a payment application and each line item that shows up on that payment application. And for change orders, do you like to see them in a change order column associated with that line item? Or do you like to see them all the way at the bottom? Change order 1, change order 2, change order 3. Inline is always messy. It can be. I like just having change order 1 all the way down at the very bottom, and I can bill 100% for change order 1. Change order 2, I can bill 100% for. So on this one, I like to just go in and pick new line item. If I had multiple line items here, it would give me an option to say same as 1, because this would be my first line item. And so then I'm grouping all of these different line items into one line item that's just change order 1, basically, is what I'm trying to do. So that's the other key thing. New line item, same as 1. On anytime you get to a screen where it's asking you to do this. And that goes for anything across the board. New line item, same as 1, always try to group. So here, this workflow is also, would be typically already set on your project. The exact same thing as I showed you on the prime contract, where that configuration tool is where you set that workflow up. Under commitments, under that configuration gear icon, workflows is where you would put your names in these roles at the beginning of the project. I'm gonna take that. Role. So I'm doing this, but I'm doing this right now inside of this one change order. It's not gonna make that change on my entire project workflow. That has to be done in the configuration area. All right, so I'm gonna create this one. Very similar to that other change order workflow. I got notified as the PM. Because anybody can be a creator, you know. If you have a project coordinator working on a job with you, she could be the one who's creating it. It all depends. Like we just have a lot of different roles that sometimes overlap tasks depending on the project composition. All right, so this one, I'll just review it and I'll say, okay, it's good. So if I say it's good and it's less than $5,000, send out to the subcontractor, it's just gonna go to Anna. Anna's gonna then send it out. If it's more, then it goes through the rest of that tiered workflow we talked about, or I could reject it back to the creator if I didn't agree with it. At that point in time, so this one, I'm just gonna go ahead and submit it. Now, when I go back to my change events. 15. You can now see my commitment has been written against it. Once you can see it here in your committed column or over here in your prime contract change order column, it is now going to reflect and show up on our budget. Until then, it doesn't. It views everything, the system views everything as a draft until it's been approved. Once it's been approved, it then will populate budget page. So if I wanted to go and find those change orders, I could, my approved ones should now be. Showing up here. So. This test project is so messy on the budget. I'm actually gonna go to a real project budget. Just because we've been messing around in here for a year, it's not clean enough to really show you guys a good example. So I'm gonna go into like back in the project. All right, do you guys want to do a 5-minute break like we did yesterday? And then we'll, because we need to be fresh for this next budget piece. Really super. We track all the money.
Yeah.